Welcome back, guys, or if you're new to my channel, this is Automotive Anonymous, and that's the highly anticipated 2025 Subaru Forester Hybrid. But more specifically, this is a premium trim level, in a color that Subaru likes to call Crystal White Pearl, which just so happens to be the exact same spec and color as our own 2025 Subaru Forester. But while this is the newest hybrid on the market, and it has a lot of things going for it that outpace the competition, it's not perfect, so today I get to share the good, the bad, and the ugly of the 2025 Subaru Forester Hybrid to help you guys at home decide if it might be the right vehicle for you, or if you should leave it at the lot and look at the other competition. So today you can expect to see a walk around, all the specs, initial driving impressions, 0 to 60 on GPS, and then my final thoughts. And huge thanks to the Twin Falls Subaru for letting me borrow this one for the day. I'll link them both if you're interested because they sell below MSRP, they ship all over the country, and with that said, let's dive right into this review. And if you like Subaru, the Forester Hybrid, or my video, please be so kind to consider liking my video. Basically, that lets me know you want to watch more stuff like this. It helps the video get shared and help you as well by having the YouTube choose to show you more stuff like this. Thank you so much. But if you're new to Subaru, or you're new to the Subaru Forester, there's a few things that you should probably know. Subaru has been around for over 100 years. Back in the day, they used to make not automobiles, but military equipment. And then a few years after World War II ended in 1954, they pumped out their very first automobile. It wasn't until 1968, though, that they came to the United States market, and they've made a big impact ever since then. In all the years since then, they've grown a lot, they've figured out who they were, and they make off-road capable unibody vehicles. Subaru for 2025 is actually rated #1 by Consumer Reports as the most likely to be a reliable vehicle, which is pretty cool. But in general, Subaru is a Japanese automaker that makes safe and fairly affordable vehicles, and I don't think the Forester is really any exception, especially where there's 10 trim levels currently offered. Although a lot of that is a hybrid and a non-hybrid trim level now. The cheapest base model starts at about $30,000. The cheapest hybrid, which is this, starts at about $35,000. It does have a few extra options and destination and delivery, which you really can't get out of, making this about a $37,000 vehicle. And for that, it really includes a lot of stuff. But the Forester, at least for 2025, is still assembled in Japan. Next year, they're going to be moved to the American Indiana plant, where the Subaru Legacy currently is made, because that vehicle is going away pretty soon. And then these sell about 150,000 units every single year in the United States market, but they're also a global platform, sold in other countries, and that's pretty cool. But a few of my favorite things about the Subaru Forester, and why we personally own this example without the hybrid battery and a couple electric motors, is you get a lot for your money. For $30,000 for the base model, you still have the roof rails, you still have the Gen 4 eyesight system, which is a 3-camera design, and one of the best adaptive cruise control systems in the market, beating a lot of the other compact crossovers. The way this keeps in your lane and centered in your lane really surpasses a lot of the competition. It also has really bright LED headlights. This premium even has fog lights, and this being a top safety pick means it really holds up well in crash tests. But if you do want to splurge and you want to spend $6,000 or $7,000 more for a hybrid premium over the base model non-hybrid, you get powered heated cloth seats up front, you have a panoramic sunroof, you also have the proximity key, which is pretty cool. You have a power liftgate, which comes standard on the hybrid premium, but not the regular non-hybrid premium. You also have navigation in the new infotainment cluster, and a few other creature comforts and upgrades that you'll see throughout this video. And one of the reasons that we love the Forester and why we personally have bought one is because the visibility is fantastic. Look at how big the windows are in comparison to the rest of the door panels. And look at how easily it parks in an average size parking spot. This vehicle is only about 15.25 feet long. Has a wheelbase that's about 8.75, so it is planted and stable on the road. It's roughly 6 feet wide and a little bit over 5.5 feet tall. But because this does have a battery pack, a couple electric motors, and a little bit more sound deadening than the non-hybrid, it does weigh about 300 pounds more, so expect this to tip the scales at 3,900 pounds. But what's really neat is the payload capacity has not suffered. It has not lost anything. It still has a 900-pound factory rating on the suspension, which is really cool. So between the roof rails, the inside, the cargo area, you can hold 900 pounds worth of people and stuff in this. But unfortunately, this hybrid can only tow 1,500 pounds, just like the regular non-hybrid. And then it has 8.7 inches of ground clearance, like all the other Subarus. a 370 final drive ratio, and it can do a full circle in 35 feet. And then the last few things to mention out here is the non-hybrid Forester. When you lock the vehicle, the gas door locks, and when you unlock the vehicle, the gas door unlocks. But this, being a hybrid, having an Atkinson cycle engine, how the evap system works for pressurizing the gas tank and everything, it's going to be locked either way. You actually have a manual release button, which is kind of a Toyota thing to do on the driver's side footwell to open it up. But it's a 16.6 gallon tank. This is now rated for 581 miles of max road trip and range, although you might be able to beat that in perfect situations. But this one rated for about 35 city, 34 on the highway is probably a pretty accurate estimate. As someone who owns a Toyota RAV4 hybrid, I will say you could get decently worse than that in cold winter weathery conditions where you need the HVAC on and a lot of heat, a lot of energy to run the engine. Or you could beat it by several miles per gallon like what I've been able to do in my time with this vehicle today. And then the wheel is a Falcon all season. It's a 225, 55, 18. It has about 830 seconds of tread. And then this again is your key. It's the proximity key, so you can leave it in your pocket to get in and out of the vehicle. It also has a key hidden in the remote when you slide that button over. But otherwise it has lock, unlock, power liftgate, panic button. So I'm just gonna leave it in my pocket and use the proximity key features right here to lock and unlock the vehicle. The driver's side door panel opens up easily, and it's a very nice big opening. But like most Subarus, you have a lot of different materials. So you have some variations of plastic, some variations of cloth with blue Hobby Lobby stitching, and sort of a synthetic armrest right there. The speaker down there, it doesn't sound fantastic. It's basically what you'd expect for the base model speakers. You can get a Harman Kardon speaker system upgrade in some of the other higher trim levels. And then you have a bottle holder, some snacks, and then a small Subaru on the door sill with a seat that is almost the perfect height for someone like me at 5'11". It's easy to slide into that thing, and then it's high enough up that it's easy for a lot of people to get out without a huge width of the threshold to get into the vehicle, which I really appreciate how Subarus really think of stuff like that. And then you have an all-weather mat. It's pretty thin. It's not very tall. You could obviously do aftermarket to get a little bit more protection, especially when you go on some off-road adventures and you dirty that thing up. But then you have rubberized pedals, dead pedal, airbag, fuse box, options. That's the gas door button again. That's the EV mode button, ventilation, lighting, stock, leather wrapped, non-heated wheel on this one, and then regen braking paddle shifters. And then there's your powered cloth seat with good bolstering. It's very comfortable, and a power panoramic moonroof up top. And boy, am I glad to be sitting in here because it's 40 degrees and pretty windy outside. So the wind chill is horrible, but because of the new insulation that this has, it's actually super quiet in here. If I would be quiet for just a moment, I really can't hear any of the wind in here, which is pretty interesting. But you'll fire it up just like the regular non-hybrid. You'll notice a new instrument cluster. It's all digital this time. You can do the toggle right here to change out the bottom, which you'll notice after 5.5 miles, I've been getting 63 mpg, but I also drive it like a granny, so that's somewhat intentional. And then you can go through the instrument cluster, changing it out with the I button. And that's pretty cool. This is more for the safety features, but the horn, it's high pitched, but it's loud, it's comfortable. The belt line of the window, the door panel, the hood, all that stuff is low. Also goes down, so you have seriously like the best visibility of any compact crossover. And then you have the big 11.6-inch screen. It's not my favorite. You do have the widgets up here. You have your Stage 2 X mode up there as well. You have a wireless charger. You have some plugins. You have a backup camera, which is really not fantastic, especially on camera what you guys see with the glare from the power sunroof and the packaging that's on it. Hopefully you guys can see that a little bit better. The trajectory lines do move with the wheel, and the red is where the power liftgate would open. And then you have electronic parking brake. What I wish this inherited from Toyota is when you go into park, I wish the parking brake would engage like it does on the Toyotas. That's just a nice feature. It feels like it's protecting your transmission from rollback. And then you have 12 volt, you have some storage, and then you have a center console, which is decently sized, but it's not the biggest in class. And then this does have the upgraded compass, auto-dimming mirror, garage door, windows, and even the side mirrors are auto-dimming too. Huge, wonderful feature. I wish my Toyota had that, and I missed that about my old Subaru Outback. And then you have an LED light, you have your sunglass holder, you have an incandescent light, and then you have an extension. So not too bad. With that said, let me turn it off and I'll hop in the back. The back door panel and the back seats are where these Foresters really shine, especially compared to the competition. The doors open huge. You have a huge entryway. You have basically the same materials on the door panel that you'd have on the front, so you don't feel like you're getting gypped or skimped out back here. Speaker unnamed, you still have a little bit of grip and kind of texture right there just for fun, and then functional texture right there with the Subaru stars to get up to your raised roof rails. And then this is your back seat bench. It is a 40-60 split. They're easy to lift and lower. You guys can see I actually lifted that too high on accident. They lay sort of inclined, but they are thin, so they don't take up too much cargo area. You also have tons of room by the footwell. And even with my driver's seat further back than I honestly probably would normally drive if I wasn't filming, look at how much room you have in front of the headrest. That is awesome. But then sitting behind this extended front seat area, I still have so much room in front of my knees. I have mat pockets everywhere. I could be a backseat driver from either side. I can even recline my seats. And you'll notice some ventilation there for the hybrid battery, which is kind of interesting because the hybrid battery, instead of being under the seat like in the Toyota and the Mazda, it's actually in the back in the cargo area where the spare tire unfortunately should be, which it's not included in this one. You have a cup holder, armrest, and huge windows. Tons of visibility. Look at all the natural light on your guys' computer screen, tablet screen, phone, whatever you're watching on. This is probably over half of the screen is natural light, and that's really cool. But with that said, let's hop out and I'll show you the hatch. The back of the Hybrid Forester looks pretty good. You do have the hybrid badge over here. And I'm, of course, a little bit biased because we own a white Forester. But there's about 5 ways that you can open your hatchback. You can either push the button that's on the door panel. You can climb through the back seats. You can push the button underneath the Subaru emblem. You could even wave your foot underneath the Forester's bumper and say open sesame, and it usually does. Or you can just use the power liftgate button on the remote, which is what you paid for on this premium trim level. Back here, if this was a non-hybrid, you would have about 30 cubic feet of room. When you fold the seats down, you'd have about 74. But because this does have a battery pack, taking up the spot where a spare tire should be, and then you lose a little bit of side storage because this is now a fix-a-flat kit, which I personally would not prefer over a spare tire. You only have about 27.5 cubic feet of room back here, and then when you fold down the seats, you only have about 69. So a few feet less in each configuration than you'd have if you had a non-hybrid, as well as you're missing out on the tire. But also everything else back here looks about the same as the regular non-hybrid. You still have a cutout behind the passenger side wheel well. You still have some tie downs for your bags, your groceries. You don't have an LED light down here, but you do have one up here, which is pretty neat. And then you have a privacy shade, which you can pull back, insert, and then you can usually store those underneath the cargo area, which in this case is where the battery is. And then you have that vent that goes on the side of the passenger seat, if you guys remember that. So overall, it's still pretty decent, but I do wish this had a temporary spare, and I wish Subaru was able to integrate the battery pack underneath the back seats. But the reason they probably can't is because this has a rear differential. It has a drive shaft, and it has a bigger gas tank than you would get on the Toyota RAV4. So that's probably why the battery pack has to sit back here, and I hope in the future they can figure out another option for that. Otherwise, you can lock and lower it, or you can just lower it, and it works pretty well. And then as we come around to the passenger side, everything looks about the same as the driver's side. You still have the proximity key features just on the front. You also have a turn signal on some of these, but this premium does not have that. And then you have the blind spot monitoring nub right there with huge windows, non-tinted in the front, tinted in the back, probably about 25%. And then when you open up the door panel, it opens up huge. You basically have everything that you had on the driver's side, though, minus a few of the switchgear controls. And then there's only power options on the front driver's seat, not the passenger. But this is still heated. It still is very comfortable. The bolstering is fantastic. And it's not a super thick seat, so it really doesn't take up a lot of interior room. And my backpack seems to be enjoying itself, being out of the wind today. Nothing on the transmission tunnel for storage or above the glove box. This is also a non-locking glove box, unfortunately. And it's about adequately sized. No plugins, 12 volts or anything. But it's big enough for at least your factory pamphlets and papers. With that said, though, let's come around to the front, and I'll pop the hood, and I'll show you what the 2.5-liter hybrid Boxster engine looks like. Under the hood is a 2.5-liter Boxster engine, 2 electric motors, and a 6-speed CVT. So while this does still resemble a Subaru, and a lot of it looks very familiar, it is quite a bit different than the non-hybrid Subarus. And I need to quickly correct a wrong. In my last video, which was a Daybreak Blue Limited I did a full review on, I accidentally said that this has dual port injection. So I said it has port and direct cylinder injection. It does not. These only have direct injection. I mistakenly took the Atkinson cycle, where it changes the stroke of this vehicle, to also include port direction, which is something that the Toyota RAV4 Hybrid has. But this, while being an Atkinson cycle, it is still just direct injection. And then it's a slightly detuned 2.5 liter boxer engine. So the engine itself makes about 162 peak horsepower, 154 pound-feet of torque. And then when you add in the 119 horsepower electric motor, that makes 199 pound-feet of torque. This now peaks out at a less than impressive 194 horsepower. It is better than a non-hybrid, especially where I'm at several thousand feet of altitude. This is hands down quicker, as you'll see on the 0 to 60, than a non-hybrid would be, but it's not quite as fast as a Honda CR-V hybrid or a Toyota RAV4 hybrid. And then this has a different 6-speed CVT transmission and the second electric motor, which we haven't talked about. That's just the traction motor. That helps you slow down. That helps you with regen braking. It doesn't help with propulsion. You only get one motor up front for that. But with that said, everything else on here looks really good. You have fuse boxes on the periphery, the typical battery, all of your reservoirs. It is still a top mount oil filter, which is fantastic. And unlike some hybrids, this does still have a serpentine belt, but it's a smaller one. It doesn't drive as many accessories like an alternator and a starter, like some of the things that you would have on a traditional gas-powered car. But it still looks pretty easy to work on. And with that said, let's drop the hood and take this thing for a drive. Initial driving impressions of the 2025 Subaru Forester Premium Hybrid. First of all, let's get up to speed on this country road. With partial throttle, it gets us up pretty good. Low-end grunt of this new hybrid, bigger displacement 4-cylinder powertrain is actually pretty decent, but after you're going 20 or 30 miles per hour, it really starts to feel like an average Forester, especially at altitude. This overall has fantastic visibility, probably the best of any compact crossover, at least the best of at least the 7 or 8 compact crossovers that I've driven. And just like our very own white Forester Premium in this year, the seats are comfortable. The interior overall is laid out well for the driver position. You have decent amounts of storage in here. The dashboard, all the kind of the belt line of this whole vehicle, it's really low, so you can easily see really close to the vehicle, unlike a lot of other bigger vehicles. And when you have to take a corner, when you have to get on the brakes, there's not too much nosedive. Corners actually pretty decently. The suspension on this is not super firm like a Mazda. That means it's more forgiving. It's better for on-road and off-road versus being like some other compact crossovers that are only really built for on-road purposes and are gonna punish you if you go off-road because of the stiffness. This does everything pretty well. It's also fun to look at those new gauges on this one. They actually work better than I expected. I like physical analog gauges, but this digital display seems to be pretty cool. And overall, it's just a nice, comfortable ride. Now we need to talk about the differences between this and the non-hybrids and the last generation. This does have a little bit stiffer or more direct steering. At least it feels like that. I don't know that it does a U-turn any faster because it still takes 35 feet for a full circle, just like the previous generation. But the steering does feel a little bit more direct, although it still isn't sensitive. You still can't really feel vibrations or anything through the wheel, but it does turn you in the direction you want to go. Let's see how it handles this bump. Still like a Subaru, handled it pretty well. But overall, on a very windy day like today, the interior of this, I do think is quieter than our own personal Forester. You can see that flag waving in the wind. This really does do a pretty good job at insulating you and canceling out a lot of the noise that you'll hear on the outside. And when we come to a stop, and I'll be quiet for 2 seconds, we'll see how it sounds. Yeah, I really can't hear anything, and I'll be quiet once again so you can hear the spaceship sounds as we go around this corner. And just for kicks and giggles, let's do a 20 roll. Anyways, this vehicle overall, it drives like a Subaru. I have lots of videos on how these drive, and they do a good job. And I do think that this is a noticeable upgrade over the non-hybrid, in that with a few extra 100 pounds of weight, it feels more planted, it feels more stable on the road, and it does feel a little bit torquier and a little bit quieter than the non-hybrid. But is that worth about a $1,500 to $2,000 price premium? That's for you to decide. What I'm going to decide on is where my private road is, and we're going to do a 0 to 60. 0 to 60 in the 2025 Subaru Forester Premium Hybrid. Density altitude's only about 3,400 feet, so it's a little bit less than it was in my limited blue video. But I'll still do a sport mode, brake rev, traction off, launch, and we'll see what this vehicle can do in 3, 2, 1. true 0 to 60 came in at 8.53 seconds, or about 4/10 faster than the Limited. I think I did a little bit better brake rev launch, plus the density altitude is a little bit lower, but these do fairly decently at elevation like I am. My final thoughts of the 2025 Subaru Forester Premium, in even the same color as our non-hybrid white Forester. Honestly, this is a really good vehicle. For about $37,000, I think it includes a lot of stuff that people are going to be interested in. Sure, it probably is still going to take 50 or 60,000 miles of around town driving to pay back the $1,500 price premium for the hybrid components. And while this does cost a little bit more than $1,500 for the non-premium, remember some of that comes from the extra standard features like the navigation and the power liftgate and things like that. But overall, I do think that this is a really good vehicle. And if you want, a hybrid, if you want a little bit more MPG, no, it will take a while to break even. No, though, it does have a little bit more power. It is fun to drive around in hybrid EV mode. It is cool to see over 40 MPG around town, but just know you're missing out on a spare tire. You are going to weigh a little bit more, so you might go through tires a little bit faster. But honestly, I think the benefit of that, weighing more, being more stable at speed, is a big deal. Because when we got our regular Forester at about 3,500 pounds, going at 80 miles an hour on the interstate, it didn't feel quite as stable as I was expecting, especially after coming from a 4,000-pound Subaru Outback Wilderness. So this fixes a lot of those problems, but at the cost of a battery pack, at the cost of costing a little bit more, and some of those things. But overall, it's a fun vehicle. I highly recommend you guys test drive one for yourself. I am so thrilled that Subaru kept symmetrical drive, that they didn't forfeit one of their best attributes, one of their best features, just to join the hybrid competition. So what are your guys' thoughts? What are your guys' opinions? Comment those below. Like this video if you got anything out of it. Subscribe if you haven't already. And then check out the Twin Falls Subaru. I will link them below. Otherwise, I wish you guys the best. I hope you take care. And until next time, see ya.